Building a minimal plugin architecture in Python. I have an application, written in Python, which is used by a fairly technical audience, scientists. I'm looking for a good way to make the application extensible by the users, i.e. scripting/plugin architecture. I am looking for something extremely lightweight. Most scripts, or plugins, are not going to be developed and distributed by a third party and installed, but are going to be something whipped up by a user in a few minutes to automate the repeating task, add support for a file format, etc. So plugins should have the absolute minimum boilerplate code, and require no installation other than copying to a folder, so something like setup tools entry points, or the Zopay plugin architecture seems like too much. Are there any systems like this already out there, or any projects that implement a similar scheme that I should look at for ideas, inspiration?
Mine is, basically, a directory called plugins which the main app can pull and then use imp.load_module to pick up files, look for a well-known entry point possibly with module level config params, and go from there. I use file monitoring stuff for a certain amount of dynamism in which plugins are active, but that's a nice to have. Of course, any requirement that comes along saying I don't need big, complicated thing, X, I just want something lightweight runs the risk of re-implementing X one discovered requirement at a time. But that's not to say you can't have some fun doing it anyway. Smile.
Module_example.py. Loader.py. It's certainly minimal, it has absolutely no error checking, probably countless security problems, it's not very flexible, but it should show you how simple a plugin system in Python can be. You probably want to look into the imp module too, although you can do a lot with just _import_, os.listitor and some string manipulation.
Have a look at this overview over existing plugin frameworks, libraries. It is a good starting point. I quite like Yapsy, but it depends on your use case.
While that question is really interesting, I think it's fairly hard to answer, without more details. What sort of application is this? Does it have a GUI? Is it a command line tool? A set of scripts? A program with an unique entry point, etc.? Given the little information I have, I will answer in a very generic manner. What means do you have to add plugins? You will probably have to add a configuration file, which will list the paths/directories to load. Another way would be to say any files in that plugin/directory will be loaded, but it has the inconvenience to require your users to move around files. A last, intermediate option would be to require all plugins to be in the same plugin/folder, and then to active/deactivate them using relative paths in a config file. On a pure code/design practice, you'll have to determine clearly what behavior/specific actions you want your users to extend. Identify the common entry point/a set of functionalities that will always be overridden, and determine groups within these actions. Once this is done, it should be easy to extend your application. Example using hooks, inspired from MediaWiki, PHP, but does language really matters? Another example, inspired from Mercurial. Here, extensions only add commands to the HC command line executable, extending the behavior. For both approaches, you might need common initialize and finalize for your extension. You can either use a common interface that all your extension will have to implement, fits better with second approach. Mercurial uses a repo setup UI, repo, that is called for all extension, or use a hook kind of approach, with a hooks.setup hook. But again, if you want more useful answers, you'll have to narrow down your question. Smile.
I am a retired biologist who dealt with digital micrographs and found himself having to write an image processing and analysis package, not technically a library, to run on InSCI machine. I wrote the code in C and used TCL for the scripting language. The GUI, such as it was done using TK. The commands that appeared in TCL were of the form extension name command name arg0 arg1, param0 param1, that is, simple space separated words and numbers. When TCL saw the extension name substring, control was passed to the C package. That in turn ran the command through a lexer/parser, done in lex/yak, and then called C routines as necessary. The commands to operate the package could be run one by one via a window in the GUI, but batch jobs were done by editing text files which were valid TCL scripts. You'd pick the template that did the kind of file level operation you wanted to do and then edit a copy to contain the actual directory and file names plus the package commands. It worked like a charm. Until 1. The world turned to pieces, and 2. The scripts got longer than about 500 lines, when TCL's iffy organizational capabilities started to become a real inconvenience. Time passed. I retired, Python got invented, and it looked like the perfect successor to TCL. Now, I have never done the port, because I have never faced up to the challenges of compiling pretty big C programs on a PC, extending Python with a C package, and doing GUIs in Python/GT/TK/. However, the old idea of having editable template scripts seems still workable. Also, it should not be too great a burden to enter package commands in a native Python form, for example. Package name.command arg0, arg1, param0, param1. A few extra dots, parens, and commas, but those aren't showstoppers. I remember seeing that someone has done versions of lex and yak in Python. Try this URL, so if those are still needed, they're around. The point of this rambling is that it has seemed to me that Python itself is the desired lightweight front-end usable by scientists. I'm curious to know why you think that it is not, and I mean that seriously. Added later, the application Gedit anticipates plugins being added, and their site has about the clearest explanation of a simple plugin procedure I found in a few minutes of looking around. Try this URL. I'd still like to understand your question better. I am unclear whether you 1. Want scientists to be able to use your Python application quite simply in various ways, or 2. Want to allow the scientists to add new capabilities to your application. Choice number 1 is the situation we faced with the images, and that led us to use generic scripts which we modified to suit the need of the moment. Is it choice number 2 which leads you to the idea of plugins, or is it some aspect of your application that makes issuing commands to it impracticable?
Internet show processor sign.